Hey everybody, what's up? Just Ehren here, Question Period Canada. We're doing something a little different today. We're going to be watching the proceedings before the question period for the next hour. So this is going to be a really long live session. This is going to be a long one, and it should be exciting because this is the second day that they've been back. I know that I'm excited to watch what we're going to be tuning into right away, and so we're going to tune in.
They're all glee and happy. They're saying, we have 4 priorities. We're going to hit a home run on the 4 priorities. What were the 4 priorities? And they weren't the first, there was at least a half dozen members that talked about those 4 priorities yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I know there are 4 priorities. And,
this guy's a clown.
To showing
it's kind of
that
likable.
Contrast. Let me give you an example of that. What is their shiny one, Mr. Speaker? It's the
Whoops. What is happening, guys? What is happening?
Bumper sticker.
All right, we're back.
It's going to read,
Well, we're having some trouble with our signal, it seems. What is happening, guys? Well. We might have to sign out and come back and try later because it just doesn't seem to be working. I don't know what to say. It's a disappointment. Yeah, we're pretty jammed up, so I think we're going to just get running. Here, well, I guess we can't just quit that easily. We'll go back over here and see if we can get some of this stuff going for us.
And now they're prepared to take money out of the pockets of Canadians and completely disregard. So there's their one priority. What a dud that one is, Mr. Speaker. Let me talk about the second dud. They're talking about housing.
Hi, Betty. What's up?
They want Ottawa to play a role.
Hi, BC. What's up?
Mr. Speaker, there has not been a government in the last 50, 60 years that has invested more in housing than this government. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about working with provinces, working with municipalities, working with nonprofit organizations, many different stakeholders.
He's so
to ensure
animated
that Canadians will have the ability to be able to get homes and rent and own into the future, Mr. Speaker. The federal government has stepped up to the plate, Mr. Speaker, in a very real and tangible way. When the leader of the Conservative Party was the housing minister in the Stephen Harper government, he was an absolute disaster, Mr. Speaker. He had no concept in terms of what a housing strategy was, let alone the ability to construct houses, Mr. Speaker. And now he wants to take it on? Well, really, it just doesn't make sense, Mr. Speaker. The federal government, unlike, as I pointed out, any other government in the last 50, 60 years, has stepped up to the plate and demonstrated strong national leadership, and we are working with the municipalities and the provinces and other stakeholders, Mr. Speaker, on the file. Something in which the Conservative Party in itself wouldn't do. Well, what about their third priority? Their third priority is the budget. Now, Mr. Speaker, people need to be very concerned about when Conservatives talk about the budget. This is where the whole hidden agenda comes in, Mr. Speaker. And every so often we get to see some of that hidden agenda kind of ooze out. One of the examples that I'll use is the issue of the infrastructure bank. All the members across the way, they all support getting rid of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Their critic of finance made that statement earlier today, and we've heard it before. You want to talk about a dumb idea, Mr. Speaker.
Here comes
and it doesn't
something.
matter. The facts and the reality is completely irrelevant to the Conservative Party. Because the reality is that the Canada Infrastructure Bank has been exceptionally effective, and yet the Conservative Party, what they'll say is they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything. They say that, Mr. Speaker, knowing full well that that's just not true. The reality is that you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10 billion. All going to the projects way away. Just be patient here. You take a look at it. $10 billion coming from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And that money is being tripled in total, another $20 billion through different sources because of the investments that are being made by the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Now, members opposite are saying, well, tell me, how many projects? Well, let me tell the member how many projects. At last count, we're talking 48. That's a number 48. 48 projects. How many did the Conservative Party say, Mr. Speaker? 0. We're not talking about the intellectual capabilities of the Conservative Party when I say 0. What I'm talking about is that's what they say is the number of projects. There's completed projects too, Dada. At the end of the day, take a look at the website itself. If you don't want to believe me, take a look at the website. There's all forms of projects that are not only on the books, ongoing, but are also being completed, Mr. Speaker. It's truly amazing in all different areas of the country.
It's pretty wound up.
Public transit. 11 projects, clean power, 8 projects, green infrastructure, 17, broadband, 8. Some of those broadband ones are in the province of Manitoba, rural internet connection. You'd think that many of those rural Conservative MPs might be a little sensitive and want to support that. But no, keep in mind, everything that we're talking about, Mr. Speaker, here, the billions and billions of dollars, a lot of it is private dollars, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives oppose it. They oppose that sort of development, Mr. Speaker. That's building a healthier economy. That's building the Canadian infrastructure. We all benefit by that.
They keep saying we benefit from all their ideas, but look at how bad it is out here,
investment in Canada
right?
is as healthy as it is today because as a government, we support investing, Mr. Speaker.
Hey, Terry, what's
and
up?
it has paid off significantly. The finance critic was critical of the government, saying, well, we don't have foreign investment. Again, the reality, facts, play no role in what it is that the Conservative Party says. At the end of the day, foreign investment in Canada on a per capita basis from last year in real dollars, Canada was number 1, Mr. Speaker. Number 1 in the world. You would think that the Conservatives would understand that concept. Yet the finance critic is saying we're down on foreign investment, Mr. Speaker. They just can't accept the reality of good news. Since the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, when the pandemic, in terms of job numbers, there is over 1 million new jobs, well over 1 million new jobs, pre-pandemic levels, Mr. Speaker. That is good news. You wouldn't know that because you constantly get the Conservative Party going out throughout the nation saying, oh, the country of Canada is broken, that it's just not working. How does that actually compare to the reality of the situation, Mr. Speaker? As I pointed out earlier today in a question, if you say Canada is broken, then you have to believe that the entire world is broken. Because if you compare some of the measurements that the Conservative Party uses, they talk about things like inflation rate. Well, have you taken a look at Canada's inflation rate compared to other countries, the G20 countries? Whether you talk about the Frances, the Germanys, the UK, the United States, and all the other countries, Mr. Speaker, in the G20, you'll find that Canada is ranked at the top in terms of the lowest inflation rates. The same thing for interest rates, Mr. Speaker. The government policy that we have put into place, whether it's through budgetary measures, legislative measures, has helped bring down inflation rates. Because even though, Mr. Speaker, we recognize that, relatively speaking, compared to the world, Canada is doing exceptionally well, but we still need to do better. And that is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, you have seen policies that have been brought in that have made a difference, and we will continue to work with Canadians, other levels of government, in order to improve the conditions. We want an economy that's going to work for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We want to continue to invest in Canada's middle class and
Sorry,
those
guys,
that are
I'll be
aspiring
back
to
in
be
one
a
second.
part of it. That shouldn't be anything of any surprise. Because virtually since 2015, Mr. Speaker, when we were elected into government, Canada's middle class, those aspiring to be a part of it, have been the first priority of this government, Mr. Speaker. We continue in that area. We continue to support programs that will lift people out of poverty, Mr. Speaker. We can talk about whether it's the GIS increases to the child care benefits, to the many different programs that we put into place to support Canadians pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and going in and out of some very difficult times that people are experiencing today, Mr. Speaker. So when it comes to the economy or the budget, that priority number 3, I warn members to be very much aware of that conservative hidden agenda, because it is something that is going to disappoint a great number of people, Mr. Speaker. Their 4th point was the issue of crime. And stop and think about that one for a moment, Mr. Speaker. We just brought forward the bail reform legislation. Bail reform legislation that actually had the support of the different provinces, law enforcement agencies, a number of different stakeholders all over the country, every political party inside the chamber. But on the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, we had filibustering taking place on that important piece of legislation, even though the leader of the Conservative Party, months prior, said that we would pass that bill lickety-split, Mr. Speaker. That didn't happen. He wanted to first filibuster the legislation, Mr. Speaker, putting the government into a position where we had to force it in order to get called through, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I say, very candidly, whenever the election is, I suspect it'll be in 2015, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, I look forward to being able to share who the leader of the Conservative Party really is, to remind them of some of those things of, like, let's say, the cryptocurrency issue, or I'm going to fire the governor of the Bank of Canada, the flip-flop on the price of pollution, the flip-flop in terms of the Facebook making the Facebook pay, Mr. Speaker, or the big internet companies. There's
He's stuttering
so
and stammering a lot.
Mr. Speaker, that one's going to be able to go to the doors and share with Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and to contrast a Liberal Party that has a solid
Let's get some likes going. If anybody's enjoying the content, give a little like, smash that button.
Compared to a Conservative Party that doesn't even have an idea about the environment nowadays, that doesn't want to tell Canadians what their real agenda is all about, Mr. Speaker. I love the contrast. I look forward to the many more days and months and a couple more years of debate, no doubt, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
First of all, I just need to help the honourable member with his math. We're not having an election in 2015. Could be 2025, but 2015
I noticed that.
By, so I just trying to help out with the
Thank
math
you.
there. Questions and comments? Commentaire. The honourable member for York Simcoe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague from Winnipeg North is right about one thing. Conservatives are going to axe that tax. Here. And speaking of that tax, let's talk about that. He's not going to answer my question, but the Prime Minister said his most important relationship was with our First Nations. But yet he is discriminating against the First Nations in my riding based on geography. So let's talk about that carbon tax rebate. The Prime Minister did the announcement out east. I know the member from Avalon's here. His riding got rolled back with the census data so that he stayed rural. My riding of York Simcoe is now considered Toronto. No one gets the 20% rural top-up. And so the member for Winnipeg North knows to get to the Finch subway station, it takes 14 hours to walk there. The Deputy Prime Minister liked to say, she doesn't need to own a car. I can just walk out of my house and get on a subway. We don't have subways. We don't have streetcars. We don't have transit. So I'd like him to comment on that. The answer will be astounding, I'm sure.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wish the member would have actually provided an answer to many of the questions that others would have of him in regards to the price on pollution. That member actually campaigned in the last election based on, in part, an election platform document in which it said very clearly that the Conservative Party supports a price on pollution. It's only in the last 2 years in which that member in the Conservative Party has made the flip-flop saying now they don't support the price on pollution, and they have this nice bumper sticker. I suspect he might even have some of them already printed, who knows, that says that they want to axe the tax. Even if it ends up taking more money out of the pockets of Canadians, they're not prepared to abandon that particular priority. I'll give them that much, and I look forward, as I say, to having that particular debate whenever it comes.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many things that struck me in my colleague's speech, but there's one in particular. He said that no government over the past 50 years had invested so much in housing. It's probably the case statistically, but is he not slightly embarrassed that with so much investment, we've seen so few results? Today, we have a 3.5 million housing unit needs by 2030 after having invested in a national housing strategy, $82 billion of investments. And where are the results? The housing accelerator that was adopted in 2022 has existed for 2 years, but not a single house has been built. Is that not slightly embarrassing for the honourable member?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I don't find it embarrassing at all.
I don't think he's shamed at all.
I
I don't think he's capable of being shamed.
Government since
Kevin Lamoureux,
2015 that has recognized that the federal government has a tangible role to play on housing, and that role has continued to grow under this administration to the degree in which we see historic funding and programming to support housing. But it's not just the federal government, Mr. Speaker. The provinces also play a critical role, and the Bloc needs to recognize that even the province of Quebec has non-profit housing, which is supported by federal dollars, but there's also many other things in which the province of Quebec and other jurisdictions, whether it's municipalities, other provinces, territories, Indigenous communities can do. It takes a team approach. It's not just the federal government throwing a whole lot of money, Mr. Speaker. It means that there has to be a strategy strategy. There has to be ongoing discussions, and homes are in fact being done. And a great an example of that is the forgiveness or getting rid of the GST for purpose-built rentals, and now we're seeing some provinces adopting that very same policy at the provincial level, again to ensure that there's going to be even more rental all-purpose homes being built.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Port
We'll
Moody
see.
Coquitlam.
I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nice to see you in the chair. The government member there just
that a
said
dig
that
at Greg
since
Fergus? I think it
2015
sounded like
that
it.
they've recognized that the federal government needs to be involved in housing. It's just not true, Mr. Speaker. I'm on HUMA. I'm the representative for the NDP on HUMA, and the housing minister of the past, very recent, refused to acknowledge that there is a market-driven lens that the Liberals are taking on housing. And I'll tell you what, it's been damaging in my community of Port Moody Coquitlam, this market-level lens that they're taking, and they're still doing it. I think about the rents right now. I think about seniors in my community who are being displaced by gentrification, luxury condo after luxury condo after luxury condo that this federal government has loaned money for and has not spent $1 on operating that needs to subsidize and help these seniors stay at home. We have seniors living in tents, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to let the Liberals take a victory lap on the work that they've done since 2015 because they did nothing.
Well,
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Well,
Bonita.
Mr. Speaker, that's just not true. The federal government provides tens
This
of
guy
millions,
is a
likely going
clown.
to hundreds. I don't know the exact amount in terms of subsidizing nonprofit housing units on an annual basis. This government has increased that funding. You're talking about tens of thousands of units across the country. I think in the province of Manitoba, and this is my best guesstimate, is probably somewhere around 20,000 units. Many of those units are in fact for seniors. So to try to give a false impression, I think does a disservice. The bottom line is since 2015, we have a national government, a prime minister that is very much committed to the housing file. Second to, I would suggest to you, no other prime minister in the last 60 years here in Canada.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. L'honorable député de.
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle and soon Jardin de Naperville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
no.
Made a number of excellent points, including alluding to the election of 2015. And I know that what galvanized myself and many other folks in my region was when we were threatened by the previous Harper government with the extension of the access to old age security to age 67, when we knew that the child family allowance was taxable, when people knew that cuts were being made to so-called balance the budget, penny wise, pound foolish, I like to say.
She's not reading
on
from
the backs
paper. I'll give her
of
that,
Canadian
like,
citizens.
credit for
And
that.
I'd just like to hear more from my colleague about what would have the world been like if we did not win in 2015, and indeed we need to do again in 2025.
The math is correct there. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, 2015 was a wonderful year, I would suggest, Mr. Speaker. The member raises a very valid point. You go back to the last federal election, and I can recall Conservatives said that they were going to rip up the child care agreements in which that were being talked about. And today we have $10 child care, Mr. Speaker, and out of fear, we also then had to bring in legislation to ensure that we'll have that ongoing funding. But let there be no doubt, that is on the table.
Oh, no. Bumping into some bad signal, guys. Not much I can do about it.
She made reference. I was sitting in the third party over in the corner of the chamber, Mr. Speaker, when Stephen Harper actually then said he was overseas, and he made an announcement that he was going to raise the age of collecting OAS from 65 to 67. That was one of the very first initiatives that we had taken back in 2015, is we lowered it from 67 back to 65. Beware of the Conservatives and the hidden agenda, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm glad the member brought up the idea of a hidden agenda, because just this week we saw a story in the news that the Liberals and the NDP were plotting behind the scenes in secret amendments to the Elections Act without bringing in two of the major parties in this House. Secret negotiations to change the Elections Act before the next election. I'm wondering if the member could enlighten us as to exactly what that bill is going to have in it, and why the Conservative Party of Canada wasn't invited to participate in discussions around changing elections.
Thank you, someone.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, 26 seconds.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and
Mr.
watching.
Speaker, I was at Proc when
This
the Conservatives,
Kevin
the leader
Lamoureux
of
is
the
a clown,
Conservative
though.
Party, went to Proc to try to justify electoral reform. And I can tell you, there was a lot of manipulations of the Elections Act there. If I only had more time, if I had another couple of minutes, I'd be more than happy to give a more wholesome answer, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate. The honourable member for Longueuil.
Oh no, we're freezing up again. I don't know, like the signal's coming straight from Parliament, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start by saying I'll be sharing my time with my honourable colleague, always very intelligent and relevant, and even amusing in his interventions, the honourable member for Mirabel. So
we'll
thank
just
you very
patiently
much.
get through the
Bill
French
C-59.
portions.
I was reading it, and I was
We can watch whatever he's going through
looking
here.
at something to sink
having
my
a
teeth
stroke
into.
or something.
In terms of the crises we're seeing right now. Oh, sorry, we just changed speakers. I was looking for something solid, something that would have an impact in the situation right now, but I didn't find anything. Mr. Speaker, I felt discouraged. Right now, there are various crises in Canada. The linguistic crises that we're seeing in Quebec, French is disappearing. There are no solutions being brought forward to this issue. Well, that's the independence of Quebec. We'll go back to that later. We think that the stars are aligned so that we could have an independent government in 3 years, and then maybe we will no longer be here. And members in this House will be happy because the Bloc will no longer have an impact. They're always saying we're tiresome. They don't even want to take power, they say, about the Bloc. It's revolutionary. It's tiresome. They bother us. But we will no longer be here in 5 or 6 years. But we need to solve the linguistic crisis. There's also a climate crisis. Well, forest fires.
That's good news that there'll be
we
no
saw them last
Bloc in
summer.
5
There
or
were
6
floods.
years. That'll be nice.
And C-59, Mr. Speaker, I was wondering how come my Conservative colleagues are always complaining. There's $30 billion in direct assistance and indirect assistance to the oil industry. $30 billion. And as a reminder, in 2022, the 5 largest oil companies made over $200 billion in profits. And now we're sending them $30 billion in support to help them store carbon, even though no one says that really works. So $30 billion in that. And the housing crisis, obviously.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
How we could not talk about that? 3.5 billion units of housing have to be built by 2030 in this country. 3.5 million units. That's an immense undertaking. And in a budget like this, we would have imagined we'd have structural measures to face the situation. No, they just changed the name of the department. It's a propaganda.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. CPAC is not coming through well. Let's see if we can shake it up. Let's see what we can do here.
$9 million. So there's a drop in housing starts across Canada. The Liberals, if their plan had worked, we would know about it. Someone would have applauded them. We're just not, it's not just us that are criticizing this plan, it's the people on the ground who are having a hard time. But when I toured Quebec, Mr. Speaker, all I heard is that the federal government's national strategy is not working. The federal plan isn't working. $82 billion. Okay, you have to have the humility to say, okay, we tried something, but it didn't work. So take this funding and do something else with it. Let's invest to have a plan that really works in social housing and truly affordable housing. How come we're still spending millions to build expensive housing in Montreal? Someone has to be able to build housing through this program. We just have to think about things. They could have said, now what do we do? And what did I learn, Mr. Speaker? Not only we're not investing enough, we're talking about 10 million homeless people, but there's the federal program that helps organizations and people who are homeless. It's a live-at-home program, it's called. And there are people across Quebec.
That's funny, Terry. I should do that.
Who will die this winter because we did not invest enough in housing. We haven't done so for 30 years. And they're going to cut 3% from this organization's budget. 3% will be cut. Doesn't seem like a lot, 3%, but in the situation where the homelessness has doubled in Quebec and half of these people are in Montreal, how come people could think, well, when I toured Quebec, what struck me, Mr. Speaker, before I used to see homelessness in Quebec City or in Montreal, in large cities across Canada, Toronto, Vancouver. My colleague was talking earlier about Edmonton and how it was dramatic there. But now we've seen something we've never seen before. Tent parks in small towns across Quebec. In the lower St. Lawrence region, I went there, that people had never even seen this. Tent set up next to the mayor's office, seniors living in tents. How can we accept this? There are tent parks in Saint-Géraud, in Granby, in Longueuil. But they took the situation in hand. They tried to help people. But how can you live with such a situation in a G7 country? We're going to institutionalize tent parks so people can sleep there when it's minus 30 degrees in winter. How does that work? We don't seem to be heading in the right direction. And we've been saying this for years. We've been repeating it. And I thought naively that democracy would say, okay, we're going to live together, we're going to talk, we're going to propose solutions. And naively, the government said, look, this isn't working, we're going to try another solution, and then we'll find the right solution. We don't just need a nice photo op. We have to do the work for people who are in need. But no, at the end of the day, it's been 4 years we've been talking about this here in this House. This is a issue close to our hearts, housing and homelessness. But the system is stuck. It's a fundamental issue, homelessness. We have to prevent people from dying from cold. And at the end of the day, because before homelessness in Quebec in particular, there was an ongoing services. There were shelters where you could sleep, get a good meal. And there were shelters where people could start to reinsert themselves into society. There was drug abuse support, employment support, contact with families. Before we had that, between 0 and 90 days. And it used to work. You could get social housing, and then you'd start to work again and, regain your life. But now what we're seeing across Quebec is that these resources are clogged and there's no social housing at the end of the day, and people stay in these shelters. And not only do they stay there a long time, 6 months or more, there are no other people who can get access to these shelters. So we have to work at several levels, Mr. Speaker, but most importantly, we need to build housing. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, well, I did really criticize the Liberal strategy, and we're going to continue to do so. But after this tour I did, I started to write a report. It'll be published in February or March with specific recommendations. And I'll really keep a close eye on what's happening.
Thank you.
And during my tour, how come people told me, well, they told me, how come you, Mr. TRUDEAU, in your position, how come the minister himself doesn't come and sit down with us in Saguenay, in Saint Jerome, in the Gaspé region? How come the minister and the government itself doesn't come see on the ground what's happening and how tough things are? No, I do that. A member in the opposition does that. And this will be in my report. We'll make sure we move forward, and we do have solutions that we'll propose. Thank you. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Sackville-Preston. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. Well, it's very emotional, and I really always appreciate the motion here in the House.
What is he wearing?
I'd like to ask him a question. I know he supported C-13, which is very important legislation for Canada and for Quebec. It was the first time that a government recognized the decline of French in Canada, and he also knows a strong Quebec is a strong Canada and vice versa. So I always consider him to be part of our nice family here in Canada, but the government has invested before 2015. Well, they've already invested in French for Canada, and now we have 4.1 million, almost a double invested in this. So perhaps he could talk about the importance of French in Canada, across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. I'd like to thank my colleague, who I appreciate greatly. Yes, French is threatened across Canada. It's rather pathetic, the situation. Maybe $4 billion is interesting, but I would like to ask him a question. How come the government has invested $700 million over the next 5 years for Anglophone communities in Quebec? If there is one that isn't threatened, it's the Anglophone community in Quebec and across North America. So how come we're sending them $700 million for a community that is not endangered? Questions and comments? The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech and his passion for the fight against homelessness and for housing that is not just for the rich, but for people, for housing that is really affordable. It's always interesting to hear him speak about this issue. In Canada, we don't have a lot of cooperative or social housing. We're around 3 or 4% of all units. In other places, it's 20%. So I'd like to hear what he has to say about the Conservative leader's position, for whom the housing solution seems to be just attacking the mayors of Quebec. I'd like to know what he thinks about the attitude and the behavior of the Conservative Party leader. The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. I'd like to thank my colleague. I didn't mention this during my speech, but like many Quebecers, I was very insulted because Montreal and Quebec represent almost half of Quebec in terms of the population. So these are two elected officials that represent roughly half of Quebec, and the leader of the official opposition in this country, as a solution or by contacting these elected officials, he said they're incompetent. How could we think that this person, before he comes to power, we would like him to sit down with the deciders, people who decide and make the decisions? I don't see how he'll be able to find solutions at all. Questions and comments?
Then comments? Voilà. Le débat continue.
Continuing debate, the honourable member for Mirabel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Oh, man.
D'abord, permettez-moi de...
No luck with the English
First
today.
of all, I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year. It's a little bit
Harry
late,
Potter
but we
here.
have the first 60 days of the year in which we are allowed to do that. So a happy good New Year to all of our colleagues. So I find it fascinating that we're starting this new session with the economic statement, because during the holidays, the Conservative leader took a great interest in these questions, Mr. Speaker. And as we're starting out nice and slow, and we seem to have a good atmosphere here. Do you know what the difference is between Quebecers and the leader of the official opposition? Well, both are in the wrong country, because us, Quebecers, at one point in time, we will have to get our independence. But the Conservative leader lives in the conspiracy theories, Mr. Speaker, and we heard him over the break. He got rid of his glasses, he got a new look. But when you look in the dictionary to see what a conspiracy theory is, or a person who is into these theories is, it is about someone believing in something that actually is not real. So the Conservative leader goes around Quebec and says the Bloc supports 100% of the Liberal economic policies. And this tone, which is not nice, which is not respectful, that he has used over the break, and his attacks on anyone and everyone, these attacks are, by the way, not based on anything, it shows us that the Conservatives seem to believe that the best defense is offense. And in this House, there is a party that supports the entirety of liberal policies, and it's the Conservatives. And it's even worse for Conservatives from Quebec, because a Conservative from Quebec is a Liberal, Mr. Speaker, because the two parties are fetishistic about oil. So it's the Conservatives and the Liberals. In C-59, you have $18 billion of subsidies to oil companies in tax facilitation. So when they say
it does look like Trudeau in a costume.
Energy, they talk about nuclear reactors paid by the tax money of Quebecers, and this is coming from Liberals and Conservatives, so that we start exporting gas. Well, I think they should wash themselves of these types of energies. The carbon tax, it doesn't apply in Quebec. They stopped saying that. But, Mr. Speaker, they are against the carbon tax in other provinces. When there will be no more a carbon tax, the emissions will go up, and they will need to tax Quebecers to provide more subsidies to the oil companies using the money of Quebecers. That is their equalization payment. The Conservatives of Quebec and are the same as Liberals. And the tax break, when we take a close look at it, the OECD says that it's an illusion. It cannot be part of a structured response to global warming. We see $12 billion in C-59 in subsidies, and the Liberals and the Conservatives agree on these subsidies, because the Conservatives, at every single occasion, they support the liberal economic policies, Mr. Speaker, and now there's interference in Quebec's business. That is actually funny, Mr. Speaker, because hitting on Quebec, interfering in Quebec's business, it's the Liberals' brand. They have a long history in that, and they have the unique expertise in this. And now there's a bill saying that they're going to come up with a municipal affairs ministry. This is a project that failed in the past. And if you listen to the Liberals, when you need to add a stop sign in a residential neighborhood, it has to be that it's the federal government in their mind that takes care of that. So adding structures, adding bickering, adding stages of negotiation to end up not building housing, while the MP for Longueuil Saint-Hubert said it very well, that is very liberal. And Conservatives are not like that. Well, the leader of the official opposition, unfortunately, took maybe a little too much time over the break to think about these things. He tries to outdo the Liberals when it comes to interference, and he started talking about Longueuil, Montreal, and Quebec City, insulting mayors of these cities, and he has shown to what extent he actually has no knowledge of how the system functions, because Quebec municipalities, they receive their financing from Quebec, and the transfers are towards Quebec. So he is the king, the conservative king of interference. When he was a minister, he did not build a single unit of housing. He delivered nothing, zilch. The leader of the official opposition wouldn't even tell apart a 2x4.
This guy's overly dramatic.
So,
Very
who supports
dramatic.
the liberal economic policies? It's the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. And what is surprising is that when he insulted half of the Quebec population, where were the Conservative Quebecers? Well, they were nowhere to be found, Mr. Speaker. When you look at liberal policies, asylum seekers, Ottawa owes $470 million to Quebec. Why? Well, we welcomed 65,000 asylum seekers in Quebec in 2023. 45% are being helped and housed and welcomed by the population of Quebec. And when it's time to ask for payment, well, the answer we get from the Liberals is that this is not an ATM machine, as if Quebecers are not paying taxes to Ottawa. So the Conservatives from Quebec, are they supporting the request, the demand of the Premier of Quebec? How many of them were there? None. None. They were nowhere to be found, Mr. Speaker. They could as well sit in the ranks of the NDP. There would be no difference. Okay, Mr. Speaker, here's what's happening in this House. There's one single party that deserves the confidence of Quebecers. We see this, we hear this on the ground. There's only one party that is coherent, that remains based in its principles, that's not constantly changing ideas, that is not doing a campaign based on slogans, that is not doing a campaign 2 years before elections. It's the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Speaker, that has always taken care of the elderly, and we were against the two classes of senior citizens created by the Liberals, for instance. There's only one party that is asking an end to subsidies to oil companies. Not even the NDP is asking for it. It's the Bloc Québécois. There's only one party that is asking for help for small and medium enterprises. Even Conservatives are not trying to save these companies, people who innovate.
This guy's a weirdo.
People who are the industrial and commercial texture of our country. There's only one party that is asking for a fund for the media. Conservatives want to get rid of the media. Liberals are silent on that. Only one party is asking for an emergency fund for homelessness. Conservatives, they are only trying to heat up the planet faster so that the winters for the homeless people are less harsh. There's only one party here, and the MP for Longueuil Saint-Hubert said this.
Come on.
One single party asking for a fund for affordable housing. So who supports the liberal economic policies in this House? Well, they are the Conservative MPs from Quebec. And Quebecers will remember this. Quebecers are seeing this. They're intelligent. We are speaking to the intelligence of Quebecers, and this makes our difference. We'll continue in this vein, and we'll continue to merit their confidence. And they will know when it's time to vote that we have been steadfast on our principles.
Sorry, guys, we're just going to try to see if we can get the computer here to work a little bit more smoothly. It's so clunky.
Other provinces and territories take care of their problems among the same family. With that, I wish you a happy new year. Questions and comments? Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciated
This should
my
be a little better.
colleague's speech very much. when you think about the expression, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, well, he had many justified criticism of the Conservatives. Of course, he had humorous elements in there too. And I would like to also say hello to our speaker. I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year. We find ourselves in a situation where we are all Quebecers here on this side of the House. We are speaking on behalf of Quebecers as well. But there were a couple of contradictory elements. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, when he was a minister under Parti Québécois, and he was the Minister of Environment, he approved the exploration on the Anticosti Island. So that also shows the principles of Bloc Québécois. So I would like to know why they voted against our budget, why they are against investing in housing for Quebec as well. Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, I am surprised that the MP for Châteauguay-Lacolle is happy to that I said that Conservatives are as bad as themselves. Well, they seem to be accepting these compliments. Well, I did my PhD in Ontario. I'm bilingual, but in Quebec, we welcome people in French. So that is part of our values as well. And the member seems to have no issue that her government will spend millions for the defense of English in Quebec, maybe for electoral reasons. This is so. But I'm very proud that we have a CO2 emission exchange system. And when our leader was the Minister of Environment, he created the system, and history will remind us of this. Questions and comments, Honourable Member for Levy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague for his attacks towards the Conservatives, the next government. He did a very good job. Well, since we will become the next government, I would like him to come up with a list of all of his requests so that we have an understanding of what kind of a budget we need to build. Mr. Speaker, when his leader attacked all mayors in Quebec, I believe my honourable colleague was hiding somewhere. So when we talk about subsidies to oil companies in C-59 and the year's worth of spending, I just will leave him with that.
In comments, the Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Laurie Idlout's back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I just said in Inuktitut is that I'm always so happy to rise and be able to speak in Inuktitut in this House. As we all know that most MPs here are settlers, are ancestors of settlers, Quebec included. I wonder if the member has or anyone in his party has consulted with the Indigenous peoples in Quebec, the Cree and the Inuit Innu, who most likely would wish to stay in Canada as opposed to what he shared in his intervention.
Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, I think the MP for Longueuil Saint-Hubert did a very good job of explaining to us how that would work out if there's a referendum. Well, there will be a national conversation in Quebec, of course, and that will be how it is done. Resuming debate, Honourable Member for Sackville-Preston. Jessica. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My dear colleague, I would like to wish you a Happy New Year 2024. Well, I will start by saying that I will be sharing my time with the member for Vaughan Woodbridge. My colleague will speak after me. My speech today has to do with the economic plan, which is very, very important. So I will talk about that. But I will also talk about our government's positions when it comes to the economy, affordability, and, of course, housing issues.
Underlying that we are in a great position right now as a country economically, and some of the strengths I want to share, not just from me, but from other sources around the world. So let's keep in mind that Canadians created 1.4 million jobs before COVID. We recaptured that 1.4 and we build on that, and Canadians now have an extra 1 million jobs that exist in this country since COVID. The International Monetary Fund predicts that this year, Mr. Speaker, Canada will have the strongest economy in the G7. I didn't say it, they did. The OECD also said that Canada received the third most foreign direct investment in the world last year. I didn't say that, they said it. Also, if we look at the labor, back when we took power in 2015, it was just about at 7. Now we are down on unemployment to 5.7.
That is quite a voice, Charlene.
Facts, Mr. Speaker. The inflation was at 2. Of course, COVID pushed the inflation to 8.1. Today it is down to 3.4, Mr. Speaker, and continuing to drop. And we have the AAA rating that continues as a nation, which is extremely important.
Thank you, Don.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to affordability, which I want to cover here, there's 2 pieces. The first piece is what have we done since the last election, 2021? We've done some great investments for Canadians because we know that affordability is challenging out there and we need to be there to support them. We've doubled the GST payment for 2 payments for those receiving GST. That helped 11 million people. It also helped over 300,000 Nova Scotians. We added support for the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker, which helped again 11 million people, but over 300,000 Nova Scotians. The Canada Workers Benefit, which is about $2,461 per year. We've made some adjustments so that quarterly payments will come to them every 3 months, which helps them on their affordability as well. We've eliminated, of course, the interest on the Canada student loan, helping young people, young Canadians, deal with affordability. We've indexed, this is crucial, Mr. Speaker, we've indexed some major supports to Canadians so that if the next government takes over someday, they won't be able to stop it unless they bring it here to legislation. We've indexed the Canada Child Benefit, ensuring that young families will continue to prosper. We've also indexed the GST, the Canada Pension Plan, which we brought forward, made some major changes with the provinces back in 2017. The OAS and the GIS index, that will ensure that the seniors will continue to prosper as well. And what else did we do? We also brought in the children under 12 years old to receive dental support, which is allowing over 1,200 Nova Scotians that took advantage of that this year. Mr. Speaker, those are some investments that we made in the past 2 years. What the fall economic statement is bringing to the table today is key areas of investments as well. We're expanding the dental now, not just the 12 and under, but also 18 and under. Seniors, January, February, March, April, those are important months because you'll have access to dental care, which is very important. We'll also have those under 18 years old instead of just 12 years old, which will be another support for children. People with disabilities will also have access starting this year, and then next year, all Canadians that make $90,000 or less and are not receiving dental care will receive it. Those are major investments supporting Canadians, supporting the question of affordability. Other investments in removing the GST on psychotherapy and also counseling. That's important for affordability, for people that have challenges in mental health. And we are going to crack down. We're going to make major changes to the Competition Act, which will assure that we can bring prices down. We'll make sure that competition is strong here in Canada and there's no anti-competition happening. So
anybody, if you're enjoying the content, if you can give us a like, it does help.
What we're going to be making
if you like
as we move forward, Mr. Speaker. But the second area, Mr. Speaker, that I wanted to touch on is housing. I know my time is getting short because of the question period and SO31 coming up, but I did want to touch. There's 4 areas that we're focused on in housing. The first one is the investments, new investment and continued investment, increased investment in housing itself, which is important. And if you're going to build, of course, you're going to have challenges in labor. So we're going to make changes in labor that will allow us to internally in Canada to move from province to province, territory to territory, and internationally we'll bring more more permanent residents, Mr. Speaker. Bring more permanent residents in key areas of need, construction being one, education being as well. Mr. Speaker, I have all kinds of great things to share.
The honourable member from Sackville Preston Cheshire Cook will have 4 minutes left on the clock.
Greg Fergus is back.
Maintenant, c'est les déclarations.
And now, statements by members.
From the PM.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the history of the oldest religion in the world, 22nd January 2024 marked the beginning of a new era for 1.2 billion Hindus across the world, including 1 million Hindus in Canada. After centuries of anticipation and immense sacrifices, the divine temple at Ayodhya was inaugurated with Bhagwan Sri Ram's Pran Pratishtha, an act which transformed an idol into deity. Like Hindus across Canada in about 115 temples and events, I witnessed the live coverage of this emotional moment at the Ottawa Hindu Temple. The birthplace of Hindu Dharma, India, that is Bharat, is rebuilding its civilization to emerge as a major global economic and geopolitical power. Canada and India are natural partners for sharing economic opportunities and addressing global challenges. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Speaker.
guys, we're trying something interesting here. I appreciate everybody's patience. Just hang tight. We're going to get right back. And we do have a plan here, and we'll be right back. It's just one quick change. Pretty quick, reasonably quick. All right, I think we're back.
Apologize to Canadians
Sorry for all the
of his
trouble.
actions and drop the appeal.
The honourable member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am happy to share that today that Taiwan has successfully completed presidential and legislative elections on January 13, 2024. This marks the 8th milestone in Taiwan's history, and I would like to congratulate the new president of Taiwan, Mr. William Lai. With a proven track record of dedication to public service and a deep commitment to the values that define Taiwan, President Lai embodies the spirit of progress and inclusivity. As Taiwan embarks on this new chapter, let us rally together in support, embracing the shared vision of a Taiwan that thrives on innovation, justice, and the unwavering spirit of its people. These elections are another testament of Taiwan's strong commitment to democracy and freedom.
We're about 15 minutes away from when question period is going to start. These are just the statements that they do beforehand. They can be interesting sometimes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
You get to see more of
The honourable member for
more MPs'
Trois-Rivières.
faces, some people that don't usually speak during question period.
There was a thunderclap in the riding of Trois-Rivières when it was announced that my friend Guy Rousseau, general manager of the Société Saint-Baptiste de la Mauricie, was retiring. Guy Rousseau has been a fixture in Trois-Rivières for 40 years, first as a union officer, then as president of the Trois-Rivières Central Council for a decade. He has been involved in every battle, which, incidentally, is a logical course for a theologian of the liberation. Guy spared no effort or skill in promoting the culture of Quebec and the French language. He refused to tolerate the use of English words in French, or Anglicisms. They weren't tolerated in his presence or in his absence. In 2015, Guy received the Prix Rosaire Morin, awarded to a person whose writings or actions have made a significant contribution to the development of national awareness in Quebec and to the defense of Quebec's interests. He was the organizer of the Fête Nationale in the Mauricie region and a tireless promoter of Quebec's sovereignty. Guy Rousseau leaves an enduring mark on Trois-Rivières. Guy, on behalf of myself and all the people of Trois-Rivières, I thank you for your years of service to the community. The honourable member for Alfred Pellan. Mr. Speaker, many seniors in Alfred Pellan and across Canada
Look at that coat.
neglect their oral health and dental health
Jacket.
because they can't afford the costs of such care. Dental problems can worsen if left untreated, leading to a deterioration in general health and adding an unnecessary burden to an already overburdened healthcare system. That's why our government introduced the Canada Dental Care Plan, which will help eligible Canadians reduce the financial barriers to accessing such care. I invite seniors in Alfred Pellan and across Canada who have a net family income under $90,000 and who do not have access to a dental insurance plan to start enrolling right away. Once enrollment is confirmed, dental care can be covered. In fact, as soon as May 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years of this Prime Minister and his NDP coalition, Canada is in the midst of an unprecedented
This is a very
addiction
tough
crisis,
lady, just so you
one
know.
that continues to get worse. Last year, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions assured Canadians that they would end their decriminalization experiment if public health and public safety indicators were not met. 1 year in, and there's out-of-control crime and chaos and unprecedented deaths. Nearly 7 a day in British Columbia alone. It is time to end this dangerous experiment. Many leading addiction physicians from across the country have stated that this Liberal NDP's so-called safe supply continues to fuel new addictions. These courageous physicians demand an immediate end to the program that are flooding the streets with taxpayer-funded narcotics. Conservatives will listen to the experts and shut down government-supplied drug programs. We will bring hope with a common-sense plan for treatment and recovery. Conservatives believe recovery is possible and that should be the goal. We believe that every Canadian with an addiction deserves the treatment.
The honourable member from Toronto Danforth.
Today
Oh, no.
I rise to celebrate a special birthday. I'm asking everyone in the House to please join me and wish a special 100th birthday celebration for East York. It's an important part of our community that's played an important
Happy
role
birthday,
in Canadian
East
history.
York.
Agnes MacPhail, the first female MP in this place, comes from East York. Our first honoree of the East York Hall of Fame, John Candy, from East York. Not only an important actor and comedian, but a great supporter for the Argos. Let's go, Argos! So let's say that the East York has such an important place, and every day we see that spirit. In fact, East York has the longest running Canada Day parade in all of Toronto. We celebrate year after year, bringing a small town feeling to a big city. We also have an East York Historical Society that helps to preserve and keep telling that history. Thank you to community members for keeping that spirit alive. Happy birthday, East York.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Louis.
School in Point Claire, music is deep. The school is one of 13 schools to win the 2023 Canadian Music Class Challenge, a competition that salutes music education in Canada, sponsored by CBC Music in association with the music charity Music Counts. St. John Fisher's grade 3 class, under the direction of music education specialist David Arles, claimed top prize in the primary vocal category with their rendition of Turning the Tide by Luke Wallace. Competition judge and...
Hey guys, and again, I don't mean to continue to be interrupting, but something that I'm trying to do is say hello to everybody when they come in the room, the first time I see them, whatever. Or I like the community that we're building here. People are really friendly. They're just fed up with this Liberal government and frustrated with the economic times in Canada. But I just want to say, I try to say hello to everybody, and in case I ever miss you or forget to say your name, there's a lot of people that I'm learning to care about and or enjoy having watch, and I do try to include everyone. I guess that's my point. We'll jump back to the video now.
Safe walking down their own streets anymore. They're waking up to their cars stolen and being shipped out of the country. Car thefts have increased by 34% nationally. And what is this government response? More photo ops, big, large summits, more talk, no action. This Prime Minister is not worth the crime or the chaos. Only a common sense Conservative government will bring back jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders. We will secure our ports to stop stolen vehicles from being shipped out, and we'll bring back mandatory jail time for serious violent crimes that were repealed by this government. It's time to support our victims and put them first, not the criminals. That's just common sense.
The honourable member from Oakville North Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last December, I had the opportunity to lead the Canadian delegation to the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in Accra, Ghana. It was encouraging to hear so many countries talk about the importance of women, peace and security, and in particular the ELSI initiative. Known as the Queen of the Hurricanes, Elsie McGill was the first woman in the world to earn an aeronautical engineering degree and did much to make Canada a powerhouse in aircraft construction. She
It's time
was a
for
champion
Pam
of
to
gender
retire,
equality
maybe.
in an industry that had, up to that point, been entirely dominated by men. The Elsie Initiative carries forward her legacy. Since its launch, the Elsie Initiative has created interest globally as a unique, bold, and insightful policy intervention which seeks to ensure that military and police women are represented in UN peacekeeping across all ranks and functions in an environment that is conducive to their meaningful participation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hi, E. Kingston. What's up? Thank you.
Well, here's a question. How many Canadians stayed in a $9,000 a night resort owned by a friend over Christmas for free? The answer is very likely none, but there was one, and that was the Prime Minister. At a time when 2 million Canadians are using food banks, the carbon tax is punishing families and businesses, housing is unaffordable for young Canadians, while those in their houses can barely afford them as mortgages become due for renewal, and seniors can't afford groceries and are not eating nutritiously because of this NDP Liberal government, the Prime Minister didn't for a second think, gee, maybe an $87,000 free vacation to a luxury resort isn't a good look right now, but he clearly didn't care. And what about the 100 tons of greenhouse gas emissions put into the atmosphere from
Trudeau's
not
a hypocrite
one, but two of the
and
private
fraud.
jets he needed for the trip?
That's
you
what
can
I'm
understand
learning.
why Canadians are upset about his lack of judgment and his hypocrisy. It's clear to everyone that after 8 years of this Prime Minister that he's not worth the cost. Canadians see that everything is about him and that while we live in his world, the rest of us are just squirrels looking for nuts. Nuts that not many can afford anymore.
It's a pretty good piece there by
Lloydminster.
Big John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians across this country are paying a high price for this NDP Liberal government's tax and spend agenda. After 8 years of this carbon tax obsessed Prime Minister, Canadian families are struggling to put food on the table, gas in their tanks, and to keep a warm roof overhead. And yet the Prime Minister only wants to punish them more. His April 1st carbon tax is only going to make things worse for the 2 million Canadians that are already lined up at food banks. C-234 is a common sense piece of legislation that would remove the carbon tax on farm operations to help lower our grocery prices. But the Prime Minister, he's hell-bent. He's hell-bent on quadrupling the carbon tax on farmers and on Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's more clear than ever that this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend marked the 108th anniversary of a historic milestone in our nation's journey towards equality. It was on January 28, 1916, that my home province of Manitoba blazed a trail by granting women the right to vote, the first province in Canada to do so. This decision was the result of years' worth of brave and courageous actions by women across Canada, marking a turning point for our country, fostering inclusivity and shaping a more representative democracy. Their efforts deserve our recognition and gratitude. As we celebrate this anniversary, let us be proud of the progress made, acknowledge the depth of work yet to be achieved, and commit to continue advancing gender equality in all spheres of Canadian life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I could just ask members to please, if they can keep their conversation so that the speaker
Come on,
can hear
Greg
the
Fergus.
members who are making these important statements.
Greg
The
Fergus
member
is
from
annoying.
Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, the Nuu-chah-nulth people have suffered enormous loss throughout their 200-year history of colonization, not the least of which has been the devastating loss of language and culture. Today, Nuu-chah-nulth elders, educators, and learners are making tremendous progress towards revitalizing their Indigenous language, in spite of the uncertainty of federal funding from one year to the next. Now their language program funding may be cut by up to 57% due to a newly proposed federal heritage funding formula. The formula fails to recognize that British Columbia has the highest concentration of Indigenous language and cultural diversity of any province or territory in the country, with 35 distinct languages and more than 90 dialects. As BC's First Peoples Cultural Council reminds us, the revitalization of languages, arts, and cultural heritage is an essential step in recognizing the rights of and finding reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Language revitalization is essential to reconciliation, along with fair, predictable, sustained, and long-term funding.
The honourable member for Avignon.
D'Avignon,
La Métis Matan Matapédia. On the evening of September 21st, 2018, off the coast of Bas-Saint-Laurent, a 22-foot sailboat ran violently aground on a reef, leaving its 2 sailors clinging to the mast, fearing the worst. Despite the extreme weather conditions, 100-kilometer-an-hour wind gusts, and wild weather, the Canadian Coast Guard auxiliary volunteers from my region took to the sea with one goal in mind: to save lives. Thanks to Ted Savage and his crew, the worst was avoided. More than 5 years after the events, the men who risked their lives to save the lives of others have never received any recognition whatsoever. These people work on a volunteer basis with very limited resources. They deserve all the honors in the world for the acts of bravery they perform every day. On behalf of the people of Avignon, La Métis, Matan, Matapédia, I would like to officially thank Jonathan Brunet, Philippe Charbonneau, François-Xavier Bérubé-Dufort, and Ted Savage. Thank you.
The honourable member from Chilliwack Hope.
Canadians will face a choice in the next election. One choice will be the out-of-touch NDP Liberal coalition, a costly coalition whose ever-increasing carbon tax is pushing grocery and gas prices higher and higher. A costly coalition that has doubled the cost of housing. A costly coalition that has increased violent crime by 40% and whose taxpayer-funded dangerous drugs have destroyed thousands of lives. Or Canadians can choose the common-sense Conservative plan to axe the tax on gas, heat, and grocery bills, a common-sense plan to build more homes instead of more bureaucracy, a common-sense plan to cap spending and cut waste to bring down liberal inflation and interest rates, a common-sense plan to make our streets safer by bringing treatment, not taxpayer-funded drugs, and bringing in jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders. The choice is clear, and in the next election, Canadians will choose a common-sense Conservative plan to bring it home.
Yeah, he's fired up, huh?
The honourable member
Strahl doesn't
from
speak a lot
Surrey
in the
Centre.
House.
Sir Newton.
Mr. Speaker,
We'll see.
I rise today to pay tribute to a community leader, Mr. Ajit Singh Bad, who passed away.
Sorry, I'm going to just interrupt the honourable member.
Greg Fergus is always interrupting.
For a second time, I would like to ask all members to please have conversations very quietly. That way,
he's
I
so
will be able to
disruptive.
hear this member who is speaking right near me.
The top.
So
Mr.
disruptive.
Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to a community leader, Mr. Ajit Singh Bad, who passed away on January 13th at the age of 87. Mr. Ajit Singh Bad immigrated to Canada in 1969, and for over half a century, he made several impactful community contributions. He was a founding member of the first Canadian Sikh Panth magazine, Sikh Samachar, and was the
I
first
can't even pick on
individual
this. This
to
is
own and operate
fruit
a
that's too
Punjabi
low-hanging.
language radio station outside of India. Pioneer Ajit Singh Bad deeply believed in the power of community in creating meaningful and positive change. I offer my sincere and deepest condolences to the entire Bad family. Although Mr. Ajit Singh Bad will be deeply missed, his legacy will continue to inspire for generations to come.
Oral questions.
Oh, yes, here we go. All right, there he is.
Honourable
Polly,
Leader
if you
of
can
the
see him
Official
right there.
Opposition.
He's ready to go. This is exciting. Get those legs going, guys. Now it's
Mr. Speaker,
fun.
after
He always
8
opens
years,
in French,
the
though.
Prime Minister has said that he had no choice but to double the national debt, increase inflation and interest rates because all spending was absolutely necessary. Yet we've learned today that among the $54 million spent on the ArriveCan application, 76% of the consultants hired did no work at all. Will the Prime Minister get our money back and stop the waste?
Is Trudeau in the House? I
Honourable
didn't
Deputy
see
Prime
him.
Minister and Minister of Finance.
Oh, no. Trudeau playing
Thank you,
hooky
Mr.
already.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
It's the second day back.
Canadians understand very, very well that when the Conservatives talk about spending, what they want to do is make cuts.
Look at that size
They
of that
want
ribbon
to
she's
cut
wearing.
Dental
Crazy.
care for Canadians. They want to cut child care services. They want to cut investments in the green economy. That is the reality of Conservative politics, which is so dangerous for Canada.
He was talking about the ArriveCan app.
We will cut the $54 million spent on the ArriveCan app, which is an example of corruption and scandal from the Liberals. In addition, there's the carbon tax on farmers. I said the other day that the leader of the Bloc supports 100% of the economic policies of the Liberals. Spending, taxes, higher inflation, higher interest rates, and he flipped out. But the Bloc leader said he will do an about-face and will vote to keep the carbon tax on farmers' barns. How much will it cost farmers and those who buy food?
Freeland standing up again. She is one of the worst.
And Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, obviously, as an Anglophone, a member for Ontario, I can't speak for the Bloc.
Condescending that face is.
But I know that Quebec, the nation of Quebec, understands the importance of the environment, understands the importance of industrial investments in the green economy. We are proud to do so. We are proud to do it with the support of all of the members who understand the importance of this for Canada.
The ribbon she's wearing is a scarf that she's using as a lapel pin.
The Prime Minister doubled the debt, drove inflation and interest rates to their highest levels in a generation. He said he had no choice. Every penny he spent was necessary. Along comes ArriveCan, a $54 million app we didn't need, didn't work, and could have been done for $200,000 or $300,000. Now we learn, based on the Ombudsman's audit, that 76% of the contractors did absolutely no work for the money they received. Will the Prime Minister get taxpayers back this stolen money and stop the waste that is not worth the cost?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Freeland again.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have learned through bitter experience that when Conservatives talk about the public finances, what they're really talking about is cutting the government support Canadians depend on. What they are talking about is cutting early learning and childcare, which is supporting labor force participation at record levels in Canada, and by the way, making life more affordable for Canadian families. They want to cut dental care, Mr. Speaker. They want to cut essential investments in our green future.
Indeed. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We want to cut waste and mismanagement that has risen to a level that is not worth the cost after 8 years of this Prime Minister. Speaking of wasteful, this Prime Minister loves to lecture Canadians on how they use energy. He says that he's just like every other Canadian when he stays with a friend at an $89,000 a week vacation. The average Canadian emits 15 tons of carbon per year. His trip emitted 100 tons of carbon in 1 week. Did he pay the full carbon tax on each ton he emitted for his luxurious vacation?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, since we're asking questions of MPs, I have a couple of questions for the Leader of the Opposition. I'd like to know how much heating the 19-room government mansion that he lives in costs. That would be interesting for Canadians to understand. And, you know, the good news for Canadians is we're helping them with the cost of heating with the carbon rebate. So I want to know, did his family cash their carbon rebate check? It's almost $1,000.
The Honourable Leader of the
She thinks she's sassy and clever, but she's not.
That I pay for my own vacations and that of my family. And, Mr. Speaker, Canadians who pay for their own vacations are also paying too much for food. We have a bill, a common sense Conservative bill, C-234, that would take the carbon tax off the farmers that feed us and the consumers that desperately need to put nutrition on their table. Will the Prime Minister stop blocking the bill, pass this law so that Canadians can afford food?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
You know, Mr. Speaker, people who live in glass houses really should not throw stones.
She used this line
And
yesterday.
The leader of the opposition may be bragging about what he pays for, but I think Canadians should understand he doesn't pay any rent on that 19-room mansion that he lives in. In fact, he's been on the government payroll for more than 20 years, and he qualified for a full pension at 35, Mr. Speaker. And now he wants to take the rebates away from Ontario families. $1,000 a year, he wants to take that away.
That was great.
The honourable member for La Prairie.
Yeah.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that immigration levels are based on our ability to welcome and integrate newcomers. Unfortunately, that is totally false. In 2022, his public service warned him that if he increased his immigration targets, he would worsen, among other things, the housing crisis. The Prime Minister did it anyway. Now he must correct his lack of judgment. On November 1st, the Prime Minister pledged to review his immigration targets starting in 2024 based on intake capacity after consulting Quebec. Will he keep his word? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Okay. Sean's going to try to
Mr.
speak in French. He doesn't do it very well.
He
just dances.
Welcoming people and building housing at the same time. That is why we are negotiating an agreement with Quebec for $2.8 billion to build 23,000 housing units. And
with our partners in Quebec to welcome newcomers who contribute essential skills to our economy and build houses at the same time.
The honourable member for La Prairie. The Liberals knew that raising immigration levels would worsen the housing crisis. They did it anyway. And now, even with the consequences staring them in the face, they're not even correcting the situation. No, on the contrary, in 2024, they'll increase again to 485,000 people, and in 2025, 500,000 people. Even in the midst of a crisis, they continue to increase immigration targets against the advice of their public service and economists. When will they be responsible enough to adjust their targets to our capacity?
Yeah, it's just frustrating to listen to the
Honourable
bloc.
Minister of Immigration,
I don't mind the
Refugees
French,
and
but the bloc
Citizenship.
issues,
The member
a little
opposite
bit.
seems to
A
forget
whole lot.
that we have a unique agreement with Quebec, the Canada-Quebec agreement that transfers over $700 million annually to Quebec to manage its levels. They have the almost exclusive capacity to choose the people who go to Quebec. We will work with Quebec to ensure that it works with their capacity, but I'd like to ask a question. He seems to want to cut immigration. Where would he want to cut?
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
What do you get with 24 Liberal MPs in Toronto? A housing crisis. A Davenport MP that gaslights and attacks the city and the housing workers that are struggling to make sure people have a place to call home. Whether you were born here or moved here, no one should live on the streets. The city and the housing groups are just asking the Liberal government to do their fair share. So will the Liberals provide the $250 million that Toronto needs now?
Hear, hear.
I don't know. What do you guys think about JAGMEET? I'm done with the guy. I don't trust him anymore.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member opposite for the very important question and for pointing to the importance of the great city I have the privilege of representing, Toronto, which is such an engine of economic growth for our entire country. Mr. Speaker, we are having very constructive conversations with the City of Toronto and with the Province of Ontario. We are providing $1.5 billion for Toronto in 23-24. We're there for Toronto more than any government in Canadian history.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
We need to let down Toronto.
Yesterday, the Minister of Industry gave me a good laugh. He said he was disappointed in the big grocery chains after asking people to look at the flyers. And after failing to stabilize prices, he concluded that another investigation was needed. We know the problem. People are being ripped off while CEOs are lining their pockets. When will the Liberals stop protecting the profits of big grocers? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. I'd like to thank my colleague for his important question. Mr. Speaker, the price of groceries is an issue that affects all Canadians. That is why, Mr. Speaker, Canadians understand that the best way to stabilize prices in the medium and long term is to have more competition in the country.
But it's on his
wrist. That is exactly
wrist.
why we've amended the Competition Act in December to give more power to the competition agent. And yesterday, I asked him to use his new powers to help stabilize prices in Canada. The leader of the NDP should be pleased with that action.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Another year means another
All right,
carbon tax
Melissa
increase
Lanceman's
on
great.
April 1st. It was minus 50 in some places in this country where Canadians can't even afford to heat their homes. Yesterday, the finance minister lectured Canadians on her out-of-touch version of events, and then we learned that the Liberals were going to change the name of the carbon tax. Taking money out of the pockets of Canadians rebranded is still taking money out of their pockets. So instead of paying high-priced consultants to remove the carbon tax or change the carbon tax name, they should take some free advice and cancel it April 1st.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what is really out of touch. What is out of touch is for a Toronto MP like the one sitting opposite to be saying to the people of Ontario, to the hardworking families of Ontario, we are going to take away the $974 you are getting back thanks to the price on pollution. We're going to cut that money that
doesn't
goes
work that way,
directly
though.
to your family budget. Oh, and by the way, we're going to cut daycare and dental care along the way too. That's not going to help anyone in Canada.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I don't remember a government so indifferent to the plight of Canadians. Her advice of cutting Disney Plus is cold comfort to the woman who's putting water in her children's milk. The cost of some produce is up 94% since she got here. They can lower the cost of food, of gas, of home heating by canceling the increase instead of quadrupling the tax. They paused it for one region where their MPs revolted. Where are the rest of their silent MPs who should be speaking up for their neighbours that are asking to cancel the increase?
Honourable Minister for Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to being out of touch with regular Canadians, let me tell you what was out of touch. It was having a temporary leader who charged 20 grand to move into her temporary house and then charged Canadian taxpayers more than $5,000 for bed and bath linens. That's for towels and sheets. And Mr. Speaker,
Is she talking about Candice Bergen?
Canadians need to know is these Conservatives would cut childcare, they would cut dental care, and they would cut the carbon rebate people are getting.
The honourable member from Lakeland.
That Deputy Prime Minister is so
Yes.
out of touch. This is the truth. After 8 years, Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. Last year, 2
Stubbs is
million
awesome.
Canadians needed help from food banks every month. That's a shocking 78% increase from just 2 years before. And food banks say 2024 will be even worse. The Conservative Common Sense Bill C-234 would take the tax off farmers to lower food prices right now, but the Liberals force senators to gut it. So why won't the Liberals axe the tax from farmers to bring down food prices for Canadians?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
We will take no lessons from these austerity Conservatives when it comes to supporting the most vulnerable Canadians. Since we formed government, 2.3 million Canadians have been lifted out of poverty, and the poverty rate has fallen from 14.5% when they were in government to 7.4%. They want to cut child care, they want to cut dental care, and that MP from Alberta wants to cut the $1,500 Alberta families are getting from the price.
Hopefully Stubbs is back up.
The honourable member from
Yeah,
Lakeland.
Stubbs is back up.
Well, listen, the Liberals' schemes, scams, and spin jobs don't help the millions of desperate, hungry Canadians struggling just to get by every single month. This is the fact. When you tax the farmer who produces the food, the trucker who ships the food, and then the cost of heating and cooling and storing the food, Canadians can't afford the food. But these out-of-touch carbon tax crusaders, they don't care. And they're going to quadruple it on April 1st. Conservatives will axe the tax for all for good. But why won't these Liberals just pass Bill C-234, reject the Senate amendments, tax the tax on farmers, and bring down food prices today?
Yeah, she's pretty sharp, guys. She's one to watch.
Speaker, I'll tell you where Conservatives were
Oh, no.
focused just over a week ago.
Randy
who's who
Bossino's a
collection
fool.
of Conservatives gathered for a pep talk from far-right U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson.
What's Fergus going to say here? Order. Colleagues.
Colleagues.
Chris Donchemont is such a better
Once again, for us
House
to be able to hear the
Speaker.
questions and hear the answers. I know that yesterday, if you will recall,
Fergus
there was a member who
sucks.
had complained about the noise level, which made it difficult, especially for people who need to listen to translation.
The Honourable Minister.
Last week, a who's who of Conservatives gathered in Alberta for a lecture and a series with far-right commentator Tucker Carlson. And in that speech, one of them which focused and which had the Premier Danielle Smith attend, we heard attacks on francophones, homophobic jokes, and traditional best hits of MAGA politicians. Mr. Speaker, a Conservative nomination candidate in my riding went on Twitter, had lots of fun on it. Here's the question. Will his leader stand with the candidate or call him out, or is he standing with Tucker Carlson?
They're doing this dividing and distracting, guys. Like, they're saying, oh man, I find that frustrating because a lot of Canadians will see this and just leave it.
The Honourable
Like,
Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians who used to belong to the middle class are going hungry. The Prime Minister and his radical Environment Minister know that if it costs a farmer more to grow food, it's going to cost Canadians more to buy food. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Farmers, ranchers, and producers are asking for Bill C-234 to lower their costs. So will the Liberals finally reject the amendments from Bill C-234 from the Senate, remove the carbon tax completely, and lower the price of food for all Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Oh,
I fully
no.
understand the
Mr.
importance of
Magoo.
looking after the land, being a farmer, I fully understand, and taking steps to prepare the industry for the future. Mr. Speaker, that's why we invested as a government $1.5 billion to make sure our farmers and ranchers and processors are ready for the future. We are going to continue to make sure our farmers and ranchers remain on the cutting edge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, the 2 million Canadians who rely on food banks deserve better than that cheap deflection. 1 in 5 Ontario households who struggle to put food on their tables deserve better. They need this government to stop inflating food prices. They need the Prime Minister to stand up to his radical Environment Minister and carve out the inflationary carbon tax for our farmers, producers, and ranchers. So will the Liberals finally do the right thing? Reject the Senate amendments to Bill C-234, remove the carbon tax for farmers, and lower the price of food for Canadians.
common sense, right?
Again,
oh my God.
If I could ask members,
Fergus.
especially members whose voices do carry, the member from Calgary Signal Hill, please, to allow the question to be asked so that the Speaker can hear it clearly. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and
Magoo
Agri-Food.
is back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, but being a farmer, she must fully understand it's so important that
He looks like
we
a farmer,
invest
right?
in what farmers do. When you see what takes place across the country with the devastating fires, the devastating floods, it's so important that we take care of the environment. Farmers fully understand you have to take care of the land, you have to take care of the environment, and if not, your food price will increase dramatically. We are and will continue to make sure we support our farmers and ranchers right across this country.
Well done.
They say well done. Like,
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Since 2021, the federal government has been withholding the money it owes Quebec for receiving asylum seekers. It's been so long that the bill has reached $470 million. Yesterday, finally, Ottawa leaked to the papers that it would be announcing some good news today. It's 2:45 and still nothing. Yesterday, in his first answer in 2024, the minister talked about playing politics on the backs of immigrants. Do you know what playing politics at the expense of immigrants is? It is withholding for years the money needed to provide them with services. Where is the money? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, the member was here in the House. He
Mark
didn't learn
Miller's
that
a
in the
joke
news.
too.
I announced that there would be good news this week. It will be under my authority. It won't be meeting all of the demands of Quebec, but we will be supporting them in receiving asylum seekers and supporting Quebec in its efforts to ensure that these people are accompanied well. This is a responsibility at both levels of government, and we will continue our good work together. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Quebec doesn't play politics on the backs of immigrants. These people need services, and Quebec is scrambling to provide them at Quebecers' expense. People first, money later. It's only here in Ottawa that politics is lacking. It's just here that the government has been trying for years to save money on the backs of asylum seekers and Quebecers. Today, I invite the federal government to take up its responsibilities. Where is the $470 million? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker,
I find the bloc to be very
you'll agree
divisive.
that it's not saving money to give $700 million a year to Quebec under the Canada-Quebec Agreement. In addition to the $700 million, we've never asked for accounting, but there will need to be a conversation about that with Quebec. We're ready to do so. We've had good discussions already, and there will be good news later this week. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Obviously, the heart of the matter is the quality of services offered to asylum seekers. Money is essential, but it's about much more than money. Last year alone, Quebecers welcomed more than 65,000 asylum seekers, almost half the total for the whole of Canada. Our public services and community organizations are overwhelmed. We don't have enough resources. Our capacity has been exceeded. So in the interest of fairness, but above all to guarantee asylum seekers adequate services, will the minister finally organize the distribution of the reception of asylum seekers with the provinces? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. The member opposite has admitted that it's a responsibility of both levels of government, yet last year he claimed it was only Canada that had to spend money. It's clear that we will work together, that we need to do more work. There are two provinces that are overwhelmed, Quebec and Ontario. It's a work that we can do together. We are a federation.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Mr. Speaker, for far too many Canadians, the dream of home ownership is dead, and it lays squarely on this Liberal NDP government. After 8 years, mortgages have doubled, and a staggering 3 out of 4 families cannot afford a home. Canadians know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, a cost brought about by a truly impressive mix of arrogance and indifference to the suffering of many Canadians. Mr. Speaker, when will this government take a break from their Jamaican junkets and actually address the housing hell in Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, my honourable colleague is simply trying to prey on the very real anxiety that families are feeling across this country, while at the same time she advances a plan that will build fewer homes than we are already on track to build. We have removed the GST from home building in this country. The Conservatives want to put it back on. We are investing directly in affordable housing. The Conservatives want to cut it. And we have put a $4 billion fund on the table to reduce red tape with cities, and they've committed to doing away with that too. We'll get the homes built. They only stand in the way.
Your honourable member from
Fraser's
Hastings,
a
Lennox,
bum.
and Addington.
Mr. Speaker, more empty words while Canadians are spiraling out of control. It's not only home
Shelby
ownership that this
Cramp
Liberal
Newman.
NDP government has managed to turn from a dream into a nightmare, but it's rent as well. In the last 2 years alone, rent has increased by 22%. That's nearly $400 a month. After 8 years of their war on affordable housing and rent, this government is forcing Canadians out from the suburbs and into tent cities and parking lots. Mr. Speaker, when will this government stop the photo ops and actually fix the housing and affordability crisis hammering Canadians? Yeah!
Nice, she got fired up there. Good for her. Good for you.
Mr. Speaker, for years, the Conservative approach to policies that will actually help people
Right?
is to prey on their anxieties
Clown.
rather than advance ideas that will actually address them. The member is supporting her leader's plan, which is going to build fewer homes than we are already on track to build. We have removed the GST from apartments to help bring down rent. She's campaigning on a commitment to put that GST back on for a lot of middle-class apartments, which will increase the cost of living. When it comes to affordable housing, we have put programs in place to support their construction. They have promised to cut it. We are going to continue to put money on the table to build more homes. Their policies will drive up rent.
Before I give the floor to the member for Louis Saint
Oh
Laurent,
my
I will
God,
invite
this guy.
members, out of respect for those who need to listen.
Fergus has no self-respect. Like, there's no way that you would do
the
this if you had any respect for yourself.
To please stop commenting during questions and answers. I invite the member for Louis Saint Laurent to speak. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal housing crisis.
I like Gerard
is
Detel.
hitting
Love it when he
everywhere.
speaks in English,
CBC told us
but he
yesterday
doesn't do that
students
very
in
often.
Montreal, university students, are now going to a shelter for the homeless. The director
The Roxbury.
said that this shows how bad the crisis is. This is not a solution. It takes places away from people who are homeless. This doesn't make any sense that it's happening in Montreal, in Canada. With the Bloc supporting the Liberals' economic policies, when will the government finally understand that inflationary budgets help no one? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
A night at the
We
Roxbury,
understand
that's a
well
funny
the
line.
challenges that young people in this country are facing when it comes to finding a place to live that they can actually afford. That's why just yesterday we advanced a new policy that's going to make low-cost loans available to build more student residences across this country. We're going to continue to advance policies that don't just allow students to find a place that they can afford next to where they go to school, but it's going to free up supply that exists within communities today. The Conservatives will tap into people's anxieties for their political gain. We will advance policies that actually address them.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent.
This is the truth.
Yes,
The reality
yes.
of Canadians on a daily basis. Depuis 8 ans, Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement-là a fait...
For 8 years, this
He
government
doesn't
has
speak
been
English very
making
often. It's
rents
fun when he does.
and homes twice as expensive. We need 3.5 million new homes, but we're not getting them. Millions of Canadians are going to food banks.
He's fired up, guys. He's
shameful.
intense.
When will this government act for all Canadians?
He's my favorite francophone, I think. Because he gets
Mr.
fired up every
Speaker,
time.
I see that my colleague is extremely passionate about this. But on this side of the House, this government since 2016 has brought in the first ever Canada Housing Strategy, which has put a roof over the heads of Canadians throughout the country. Instead of being in a party which likes to insult our mayors. Insulting the mayors in Quebec really means insulting all Quebecers, Mr. Speaker.
From North Island, Powell River.
It's not what he was talking about, though, is it?
No one should miss a meal. But seniors in Canada can't afford sky-high grocery prices. While big grocery CEOs rack in record profits, seniors are making difficult decisions in the grocery store. It doesn't stop there. Loblaws even tried to cut discounts on nearly expired food. Wow. Corporate greed has no limit. And while the Liberals continue to let it happen, the Conservative opposition wants to let those big companies get even more of a payout. Why are the Liberals allowing CEOs to gouge Canadians?
Rachel Blaney needs some work.
Speaker, I would like to thank the honourable member for her question. We remain focused on the affordability needs of seniors. In fact, we're very proud on this side of the House that one of the first things that we did is make sure that the age for OAS was maintained at 65
I think
years
Seamus
old,
must be
not
sober
67.
today.
This was not a change that should have been made here in this House or a change that should have been made at the World Economic Forum in which it was in Davos, Switzerland. We instead are maintaining and increasing supports for seniors in this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
It's usually silly and half in the bag.
When it comes to the over 25,000 Palestinians killed by
Matt
Netanyahu's
Green's always
brutal
pissed off.
bombardment, the Liberals have done nothing to uphold international law and protect innocent civilian lives. And when it comes to Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian hate crimes, the Liberals have failed to stop it here in Canada. The community feels so betrayed that yesterday, the National Council of Canadian Muslims canceled their meeting with the Prime Minister because they are tired of his broken lies. So, what will it take?
Oh, you're not allowed to say lie. You're not allowed to say a real word.
The honourable member is an experienced parliamentarian. He knows very well that we cannot accuse honourable members of deliberately lying. That is a unparliamentary language. I'll ask the honourable member to withdraw that comment.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw because they are tired of the broken promises. So,
You shouldn't withdraw
what will
them.
it take
You should
for
get
this
kicked
Liberal
out, man.
government to listen and start
Take it like a
protecting
champ.
Palestinian lives in Gaza and combat Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian hate here in Canada.
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Give me an opportunity to talk about the announcement we made today precisely to deal with this issue. $40 million additional to deliver life-saving food, medicine, and other supplies to Palestinians through trusted international partners, including the World Health Organization, the World Food Program, UNICEF, and many others. We've always centered our decisions around the protection of innocent civilians in Gaza, and through this allocation, we have upped our game to $100 million in humanitarian assistance to Palestinians.
The honourable member from Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, for the past few months, there has been a significant rise in the hate impacting communities across the country. All of us have a role to play during these difficult times to bring Canadians together. Can the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities share some of the measures we have taken to support Canadians and encourage unity?
Good job.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, during this difficult time for so many communities, we know that there is still more that unites us than divides us as Canadians. That's why, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce $3 million towards a Building Community Resiliency call to action. This funding seeks to support local initiatives that drive positive change by building bridges and connecting communities together. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to fighting discrimination and racism, let's learn about each other from one another. Our focus continues to be by working together to heal divides and protect communities from hate right here at home. Thank you, Mr.
Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, this government has been in power for 8 years, and look how much it's harmed our country. This Liberal Prime Minister has plunged Canadians into the worst housing crisis in our history. We, the Conservative Party, have a plan to compensate towns that speed up new housing starts, like Saguenay, Trois-Rivières, and Victoriaville. What is the Prime Minister doing for desperate families who cannot pay the rent, or those who can't even find a home? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker.
Pablo's got to go too.
It must be very hard to be a Conservative member from Quebec. Before the holidays, they voted against Quebec several times, against farmers, against the Magdalen Islands, against the Saint-Tite Festival, and just now, their leader made it even worse by coming to Quebec and insulting people. So I'd invite them to leave the dark side and come to our side and work for all Quebecers.
Come on.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you. Once again, Mr. Speaker, this government is engaged in disinformation. The member for Gaspésie-Les-Îles misled the House. She should rather pay attention to her own region. Gaspésie and the Magdalen Islands
are suffering an unprecedented housing crisis.
He might
And
be
that's
getting
not just
Diane
according
to
me.
get up and
it's
speak.
also according to Ambroise Henry, the leader of the Gaspésie Magdalen Island Collective Housing Resource Group. What is the minister doing? What is the member doing to help people in that region concretely?
Who's getting up for this one? Is it going to be Diane Labouthier?
It's really hard to hear. It's really hard to hear members who are speaking up from various parts of the room. So I'd like to ask all members to maintain.
Greg
to
Fergus got to
remain
go,
silent.
guys. Oh, I knew
Mr.
it.
Speaker,
Diane Labouthier
as
getting
I
up.
said yesterday, I would ask the member to take back what he said. After all, we know
She's
that
dressed like
people
Friar
in Magdalen
Tuck.
Islands care deeply. If my colleague really has a spine, he should rise and apologize to people from the Magdalen Islands
Oh,
for what he
man.
said.
She's a piece of work.
Je vais juste inviter les députés savent très bien qu'on ne peut. Il n'y a pas de traduction? Est-ce qu'il y a.
Is interpretation working? Members know very well then that one cannot tarnish the reputation of a member in particular. So I would ask the minister to withdraw what she said about the member for Pont-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier.
Je m'excuse.
I apologize.
Je remercie la ministre.
She's a clown, man.
like to
A
thank the
joke.
minister.
That lady. Like, I don't mean to pick on her.
Every
I don't
day
like
the
to
Minister
pick
of
on
Housing rises in this
person
house.
like
He's
that.
got a new program, a new
Seaback
announcement,
is awesome.
The checks in the mail, all of these things.
See, it's the Liberals that are out of hand right now. You can see it.
Order. Order. I'm going to invite the member from Dufferin-Caledon to start from the top. I will invite other members to please listen to the question without interruption. The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon from the
Let
top.
them do
Mr.
their
Speaker,
jobs.
every day this housing minister pops up and he has a new program, a new plan.
Do you see what they're doing here?
I'm going to invite the government house leader and the chief whip to please, if they could ask their members to listen quietly to the question without interruption. From
He just called out Stephen McKinnon, so that's interesting. He's filling in for Karina Gould while she's off on maternity leave. She hatched her alien baby just last week.
the honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon from the top, and I hope it
Seaback
will be
is
the last
great.
time who will have to start his question again.
Every day, this housing minister pops up and celebrates his new announcement, his new project, his new scheme. But the sad thing is, they don't actually build a single house. That's right. Meanwhile, in the real world, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, rents are skyrocketing. In fact, asking rent is now up 22%. Donna in Orangeville's rent is going up again, and she can't afford it. When will this minister realize these announcements are doing nothing, housing's a disaster, apologize to Donna and Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps my honourable colleague is confused about the pace at which we're advancing new policies because he's not used on the Conservative side to seeing the work actually getting done. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that when you compare our plan to theirs, they would put Canada on a track to build fewer homes than we were already projecting to have built in the years ahead. We have cut taxes, they will raise them. We have made investments, they will cut them. We have completely changed the way that large cities in this country are zoning to build more housing. The Conservatives oppose that too. We will do what it takes to build homes, to bring down rents, and make sure every Canadian has a roof over.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Except all of that leads us to exactly where we are today, nowhere. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment up 12% to $1,900. Rent for a two-bedroom apartment up 9.8% to $2,300. Rent is now at a record high across Canada, $2,100, up 8.6%. Why? Because all they have are these phony announcements and photo ops. When will he finally admit they've made the mess that Canadians are suffering through? Apologize to people like Donna. Apologize to Canadians. It's their mess.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, since the adoption of the National Housing Strategy, there are hundreds of thousands of homes that have been constructed or renovated to support Canadians who need help. There are millions of Canadians who have benefited directly from government supports to ensure that they could keep a roof over their head. We are going to continue to put policies in place that will improve the quality of life people get to enjoy by helping them find a place that they can afford. The Conservative plan would raise taxes on home building, would cut funding for cities that are trying to change their rules, and would eliminate supports for affordable housing altogether. That is the wrong approach. It was tried. It has failed. We will build the homes to support Canadians.
Then I have Deputy
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, a federal public servant from the Quebec City region has a debt of $25,000, all due to the government. It all started in 2016 when the Phoenix pay system started, quote-unquote, forgetting to pay this civil servant over and over. Today, 7 years later, despite everything that he's done, he's had to remortgage his home, and that has caused a great deal of stress. Now, if it were the minister who was not getting paid, would we really see the system forgetting to pay him over and over? The Honourable Minister of Public Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague knows,
Jean-Yves Duclos is a creepy guy.
It's unacceptable.
You should hear him when he's speaking in English.
So hard to support the public service
it's very confusing.
Are not being paid on time and appropriately. That is why every day we must work harder to ensure that people, like the one my colleague spoke about, receive the money they've earned for the hard work they've done and for all the time and hard work they've put into serving our country. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, even if this were just an individual case, it would be shameful. But actually, there are 448,000 pay problems from Phoenix, and that's just in 2023. In fact, many public servants are deciding not to change their address or deciding not to accept a promotion because they're worried that even if there's a slight change, they'll fall through the cracks in the system. And the worst thing is that this government doesn't seem to think that it's that important to pay what it owes to its own employees. When will a minister finally open his eyes and do something about this unbelievable fiasco, which would lead any private company to bankruptcy? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
He's a creep, guys,
Once
just
again,
saying.
I'd like to thank my colleague for raising this issue. She is right. We need to invest more to ensure that we're paying our public servants. And that is why we are currently hiring hundreds of new compensation advisors. We are investing in better technologies that will enable us to better communicate information between the departments and the pay center, with most of its employees in Miramichi. We've already done a lot, but there's still a great deal more to do over the next few months.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South, Northumberland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These Liberals are great at breaking things. They've broken the bank, they've broken the law, and they've broken the budget. It turns out that budgets don't balance themselves. Record government spending leads to record inflation and soaring interest rates. Canadians need the budget fixed. $1 of new spending must be met with $1 of savings. It's a simple concept. Even children can understand it. Will these Liberals finally end their inflationary spending, or will they keep breaking the budget?
The The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, bitter experience has taught Canadians that whenever Conservatives talk about public finances, whenever they talk about saving money, what they're talking about is taking money away from Canadians. They are talking, to be very specific, about taking away early learning and childcare. They are talking about taking away dental care. And they are talking about taking away the investments in things like the EV factories in Ontario that are the jobs of today and the future.
Excellent.
The Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what Conservatives are going to cut. We're going to cut broken apps. We're going to cut high-priced consultants because Conservatives talk directly to Canadians, so we don't need to spend billions of dollars to find out what Canadians think.
Lawrence is pretty
What
great.
Canadians are thinking. They want to axe the tax. They want to fix the budget. They want to build homes. They want to stop crime. Will these Liberals finally listen to them?
It's good.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've learned just now about one specific thing Canadians will cut. I'm an MP for Ontario, the member opposite is too. They're going to cut the nearly $1,000 that an average family of four in Ontario is getting right now. That is money that is helping people every day. Of course they're going to cut childcare. They voted against it. They're going to cut dental care, and they will not make the investments our economy needs.
That was a lame response, Freeland. Running out of energy.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lisley, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has been spending without limits for years. ArriveCan, the Green Fund, which is turning into something like the sponsorship scandal, the Infrastructure Bank, and all of these other wasteful forms of spending, which are preventing it from balancing the budget. And that's without even considering the astronomical sums they're giving consultants. We, the Conservatives, are asking for a plan to return to a balanced budget. Will this government listen to common sense and get back to a balanced budget in a predictable manner? Will it lay out a plan in its next budget? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to hear a question about our government's investments from a Quebec MP, because that will enable me to speak about our investment in childcare. That was originally a Quebec initiative. We are very proud of helping Quebec with this important issue. And we're also very proud about the fact that we worked closely with the province and have made the biggest investment in the history of Quebec.
They always talk about big investments, but there's never like, where's the
Mr. Speaker,
the payout? Like,
our government cares about the East End of Montreal. It has been neglected for a long time and associated with refineries and heavy industry. But now we are going to make it into an economic and social hub. Can the minister tell us how the federal government, with other levels of government, is participating in various efforts to revitalize the East End of Montreal, and how we are supporting businesses like Laboratoire MZL? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, when I ran in 2019, and with the support of the government, we committed to organizing the first ever East End of Montreal Summit. That was held last November. We brought together nearly 800 participants from all levels of government, and we announced $750 million in investment. We were supported by the local Chamber of Commerce. That's the biggest group that has ever come together for this issue. We are going to work with all of our partners to ensure that this neighborhood's potential is realized.
Honourable Member from Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, Liberal insiders have never had it so good, and Canadians are paying a high price. Yesterday's Ombudsman report on ArriveCan revealed that procurement policies were ignored over and over again. Companies were given preferential treatment, even though they lied in their bids to secure millions of dollars in contracts. More Liberal corruption and waste proving that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will these Liberal ministers come clean with Canadians and tell them why they gave this work to their buddies?
Right.
Good question, right? Kelly Block's pretty good.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Pretty good.
It's important to remember that
Oh,
the
no.
ArriveCan app was built
General
to help
Connell's a
save
mess.
lives during an extraordinary time. But with that being said, Mr. Speaker, we expect the procurement process to be followed. And Mr. Speaker, I have said time and time again in this House that any wrongdoing in the procurement process would face consequences. The CBSA has already begun this important work by calling in the police when necessary, by doing internal audits, and Mr. Speaker, we are committed to ensuring that the procurement processes are always followed.
She's a piece of work too. A bit of an airhead.
Member from Calgary Midnapore.
After 8
Yes.
years of this Liberal NDP
Stephanie
government,
Kusi
scandal
rocks.
continues to follow them. With the ArriveCan app, Liberals insisted there were no forged resumes. Fact, almost 40% of the resumes GC Strategy sent in were forged.
Wow.
Liberals insisted security was never compromised. Fact, almost 80% of all contracts did not follow security protocol. Liberals insisted procurement rules were followed. Fact, the system was rigged in favor of GC Strategies. So I have a question for this Liberal government. What kind of operation are you running over there?
She's pretty slick.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, what we expect from the public service is to implement contracts based on government policies that follow the rules and procurement policies. And Mr. Speaker, when we were aware...
I'm going to ask colleagues to please have an opportunity so that I could hear the answer from the Honourable Member, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When our government released government policies during this global pandemic to help save Canadian lives, we expected the public service to implement these contracts following the procurement
She's stumbling a lot.
policies and rules set out by this government.
Right.
Mr. Speaker, we are concerned with some of the initial findings. So is the CBSA president. That is why she has already implemented measures, including calling in the police when necessary, as well as conducting more internal audits. And there will be consequences for anyone who did not follow the procurement processes.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands.
All right, Mike Barrett.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, we have a Prime Minister who's been caught misleading Canadians multiple times. Most recently, it's his $84,000 gifted vacation to a luxurious Jamaican villa. Now, this is what he told Canadians, was that he was paying for it, but we don't know what he told the Ethics Commissioner. But now we do know that, in fact, it was a gift. He didn't pay anything. He took an $84,000 gift. The Ethics Commissioner said that, unlike what the government House Leader said, the trip was not pre-cleared. So when will this Minister and this Prime Minister start telling Canadians the truth?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Oh, no.
Of course, the member was able to hear this directly from the Ethics Commissioner this morning, but he appeared at committee and has been very clear on this matter. He confirmed that the office was consulted by the Prime Minister's office before the Prime Minister and his family went on their vacation, and he confirmed that his office provided advice on this matter and that the Prime Minister took the advice and went on a Christmas holiday with his family, Mr. Speaker. The Commissioner told committee members that as far as he's concerned, there is nothing further on this matter.
The Honourable Member from Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, our government believes that workplaces should be safe, respectful, free from harassment and violence. The Canada Labour Code includes numerous provisions to that effect, and Canada also has international obligations that outline that same commitment. 1 year ago today, Canada ratified Convention 190 of the International Labour Organization on Violence and Harassment. Can the Minister of Labour provide insight on this convention and the important role that Canada plays in international organizations like the ILO?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Labour.
Speaker, I want to thank the member for the question. 1 year ago today, Canada signed Convention 190 of the International Labour Organization, which is a part of the United Nations. 190 aims to eliminate violence and harassment in workplaces across the globe, because no one should face violence or harassment on the job, not in Canada, not anywhere. Today, this becomes a protected right for every worker in Canada. Mr. Speaker, Canada is proud to be a founding member of the ILO. And Mr. Speaker, let me add that on this side of the House, we are proud to be a founding member of the United Nations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from London Fanshawe.
Today I joined the hundreds of workers on strike at the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services. Their key demands: fair wages, better job security, and respect. But this Liberal government refuses to even sit down to negotiate a fair deal. These are workers who support our military with critical wellness services. When they wrote to local Liberal MPs asking for support, they were told the minister didn't know these 4,000 workers were his responsibility. Wow. Will the Minister of National Defence finally accept his obligation to these workers and get back to the bargaining table?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Defence.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the member opposite for this important question, because the services provided by those non-public employees are important to the Canadian Armed Forces, and those workers deserve a decent contract. Mr. Speaker, we support a resolution of this labour dispute at the table, and will continue to support both sides coming back to the table. That's the right place to find a solution.
The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Another winter, another tragic fire in Treaty
Charlie
9. Children at the Bummatung First Nation have no school because it burned in a fire and they had no fire service. Last winter, Peawanuck lost a beautiful 10-year-old child to a fire, and this government's response was, well, we'll buy you a truck, but we're not going to pay for the fire hall. How do you do fire safety at minus 45 without a fire hall? Will the minister stop nickel and diming the people at Treaty 9 and commit for all the communities properly funded fire halls, vehicles, and a new school for the children of Bummatung, because every child deserves safety and a comfy school? Here, here.
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I think all Canadians were so sad to hear about the fire that destroyed the school in Abbatong. And I spoke with Chief at Lucan on Friday night to reiterate to the Chief that we'll work with the community, not just on fire prevention, of course, the truck that's waiting for the ice roads to be delivered, but also to make sure that those students have a plan to complete their year of study here. I'll be meeting with the Chief and indeed the CEO of Matawa First Nations Tribal Council to be very clear about the support that our government will continue to provide to Abbatong.
That's all the time we have for question period today. I believe
Well,
the
guys.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
So,
Mr. Speaker, I think
interesting, right?
Seek it, you will find unanimous consent.
So, it's hot. It's great to be back in question period. It's so much fun. And we've got an audience that's building, and it's very interactive and it's fun. I enjoy showing Canadians politics. I find it's important for people to know. I just started watching the politics like heavily 4 months ago, and have learned so many things. Something is going on, and it's not by mistake. Like we're being herded into a future that I'm not interested in. I like the freedom of going to the grocery store and choosing which groceries I'm going to buy. Anyways, it's just tough times in Canada, but we're having a lot of fun with you, learning about Canadian politics. We've been on here for a few hours live now, and I've got to go to the washroom, so we're going to run and do that. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. We do have a good time learning about Canadian politics, and sometimes you got to look at the bad stuff to see how you make it better. That's kind of what we're doing. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay warm and have something healthy to eat. We'll catch you in the next video. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.